My name is Lila Murphy, and I'm 28. Birthdays have always been a quiet affair for me. Low-key dinners, a few close friends, but this year I wanted something a little bigger. Something where I could just be seen. Not just as the girl who remembers everyone else's birthdays, or the one who texts thinking of you when she hasn't heard from you in months. I wanted tonight to be about me. The restaurant was softly lit, warm amber spilling over polished tables, the kind of place that smells faintly of vanilla and oak. About a dozen people were gathered around my table, friends from work, college, and the neighborhood. Everyone had a drink in hand, laughter spilling easily into the corners of the room. Everything should have felt perfect. I decided to share a story, one of those stories that makes you vulnerable without even realizing it. Last week, I began, my voice a little shaky. I spent 2 hours in the parking lot with a coworker. He'd just gone through a divorce, and he broke down. I didn't try to fix anything. I just sat there with him. I glanced at the group, meeting soft smiles and nods. That was the part that mattered. Understanding, presence, quiet solidarity. Then I continued, feeling a little braver. And Mrs. Chun, our neighbor, her cat died. Whiskers. She's 74 and lives alone. I made her tea, just sat with her while she cried. Sometimes people just need someone to notice. The words were still on my lips when Andrew leaned back in his chair, that easy smirk I once found charming twisting into something sharp. "Wow," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 2 hours in a parking lot? Helping an old lady mourn a cat? That's... So you, Lila. Seriously, you're like a human Hallmark card. The table stiffened. A few friends laughed nervously. A couple looked away. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. The soft glow of the restaurant suddenly felt harsh, like a spotlight on every flaw he chose to mock. "I mean," Andrew continued, "you actually expect people to be impressed by this? It's exhausting watching you try to fix everyone's feelings all the time." I wanted to shrink into my chair. The laughter felt like knives. But there was something else, too, a tight coil of anger beginning to twist inside me. He had done this before, but never so openly, so calculatedly. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sometimes," I murmured, "people just need someone to listen." Yeah, he said, rolling his eyes. "Listening, checking in, sending thinking of you texts like it's a war crime. You're too sensitive, Lila. Grow up." A silence fell over the table. My pasta tasted like ash. I wanted to tell him to stop, to defend the small kindnesses that had become the quiet backbone of my life, but I didn't. I let the words sit, sharp as glass, in the air. Marco, one of my oldest friends, shifted uneasily. I cried at that movie too," he offered, hesitant. Andrew laughed. "Great, another sensitive one. You two should start a support group." I caught Claudia's eyes across the table. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me, quiet, steady, understanding. And in that brief glance, I felt the smallest flicker of relief. Not everyone would side with him. Not everyone would think this made me weak. I smiled faintly, a little wryly, and said nothing more. But inside, I was churning. Birthday wishes, warm candles, laughter. It all felt like a lie now. My own boyfriend, mocking me, turning my empathy into a joke in front of everyone I cared about. I remembered all the times I'd stayed up listening to friends cry, the hours I'd spent on small gestures that no one had thanked me for. And now it was all being called pathetic, childish. Andrew didn't stop. He recounted how last weekend I had spent 3 hours helping our neighbor after her cat died. "A cat, Lila, a cat. And you made her tea. Embarrassing. Really. Grow up." My face burned. Everyone had gone quiet, caught somewhere between awkward laughter and polite silence. I focused on my glass of water, watching the condensation drip like tiny reminders of every moment he'd belittled me. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to stop this public humiliation, but I didn't. I sat there, polite, measured, and inside, a storm was building. Something was shifting. Something was telling me that if I kept letting him belittle the small acts of kindness that defined me, I would lose a piece of myself I couldn't afford to give away. As dessert came and the party continued, Andrew kept the jabs coming. How I was clingy for remembering birthdays, weird for checking in on friends, dramatic for caring too much. The social atmosphere was strained, and every laugh at his jokes felt like an accusation that I was somehow too much. I smiled anyway, ate my dessert, nodded at conversations I didn't want to be part of, and yet, The seed had been planted. I began to realize maybe growing up didn't mean shrinking, didn't mean laughing at myself when someone else mocked me. Maybe it meant standing firm, recognizing my worth, even when the person I loved couldn't. The night ended with polite goodbyes. Andrew leaned close, whispering something about finally admitting I need to grow up. I nodded, outwardly calm, but inside my heart was pounding. Not with guilt, but with a sudden clarity. Something had shifted. Something had to change. The next morning, the sunlight felt unusually sharp through my bedroom window, as if it were trying to cut through the fog of embarrassment and shame Andrew had left behind. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every laugh, every eye roll from last night. My own birthday, my moment, had been hijacked by mockery, and I realized, with a clarity that both scared and freed me, that it wasn't just one dinner, it was 3 years of this. I got up and moved quietly through the apartment. Every framed photo, every little token of normalcy, suddenly felt heavy. Andrew's voice echoed in my head. Too sensitive. Grow up. Embarrassing. I thought about all the times I had been there for people, friends, neighbors, colleagues. Derek when he'd lost his job, Mrs. Choon after her cat died, Nora's teacher when she confided fears about a parent. My life was quietly full of these moments. And yet, I had been mocked for them, as though caring too much made me somehow flawed. I knew what I had to do. Not dramatic, not impulsive, but deliberate. I needed space. Not just from the apartment, not just from the birthday aftermath, but from Andrew himself. He wasn't just a boyfriend who mocked me. He was a person who couldn't handle real emotional intimacy, and I deserved better than being belittled for the very things that made me human. I called Derek, my voice calm, firm. Hey, the cabin. Your family one? The month-to-month deal? I'll take it. There was a pause on the other end. Today? Yes, today. Wow, sudden. Yeah, I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. Sudden, but necessary. Time to grow up, make mature decisions. While Andrew would later try to twist this into some childish tantrum, in reality, I packed deliberately. Essentials, documents, clothes I'd need. I left everything else. No dramatics, no scenes. Mature people don't make spectacles of their decisions. They act with quiet integrity. Before leaving, I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Andrew, you're right. I need to grow up. Mature adults don't stay in relationships where kindness is mocked. I'm staying at a friend's place while I figure things out. We should talk, but I need space first. Lila. I drove to the cabin, the engine humming like a pulse in the quiet of the early afternoon. The city receded, the chaos of last night shrinking behind me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of relief. This was my choice. I was taking control of my life, my emotions, my space. The text messages from Andrew started around 2 p.m. Short, sharp, manipulative. Lila, is this a joke? You can't just leave. Stop being so sensitive. Each one was a reminder of everything I had endured, a mirror of his unwillingness to face genuine feelings. I didn't respond, not yet. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was Claudia. My fingers hesitated, then I answered. Lila! Thank God. Are you okay? Her voice carried worry, not judgment. I'm fine, I said, and for the first time in hours, I meant it. He's losing it. Calling everyone from the party, ranting about how you abandoned him over nothing. I exhaled slowly. It's not over nothing, but that's not why I called you. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Can I ask you something? Something personal about being sensitive? Her pause carried weight. My pulse quickened. Of course. My dad, he's been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. I haven't told anyone yet. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I felt a familiar calm settle over me. This was the space where empathy mattered, where sensitivity wasn't mocked. It was essential. I spent the next hour on the phone with her, sharing resources, support groups, and just listening. No jokes, no judgment. Just presence. After we hung up, I realized something. Andrew mocked me for being emotionally available, but here I was, truly needed, making a difference without pretense, without performance. The realization cut through the guilt and shame he tried to place on me. Sensitivity wasn't my weakness, it was my strength. That night, as I looked out over the quiet, forested hills surrounding the cabin, I understood that growing up didn't mean shrinking. It didn't mean laughing at myself when someone else mocked me. Growing up meant standing firm, owning my empathy, and knowing when to step away from people who saw my kindness as like a flaw. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The cabin was quiet, almost eerily so at first, but that quiet wasn't empty. It was space. Space to think, to breathe, to remember who I was before Andrew mockery started to weigh on me. I had spent so long bending, shrinking, apologizing for being sensitive, for being kind. Now, for the first time in years, I felt free to act without fear of ridicule. The first person I reached out to was Claudia. Her father's recent diagnosis had shaken her deeply. She needed someone who could listen, truly listen, not someone to offer cliches or roll their eyes at her fear. We spoke for hours. I gave her information on support groups, medical contacts, and websites, but mostly I just listened. I let her cry, let her rage, let her be human. Then there was Jenna, who had quietly struggled with her mother's health. When she had tried to talk to Andrew in the past, he dismissed her concerns with a casual, "Stop being so dramatic." But now, Jenna called me. She needed the same thing Claudia had, a safe space, someone who actually cared. It struck me as I spoke to both of them. My empathy had always been there, freely given, yet Andrew had made it feel like a flaw. And yet, in these calls, there was no judgment, no mockery, only connection. For the first time, I saw the difference clearly. My kindness had never been the problem. Andrew's inability to see its value had been. Meanwhile, the social fallout began. Word had spread about my departure from the birthday party and the texts I had left. Andrew tried to frame it as childish, dramatic, a tantrum. But those who knew me, Claudia, Jenna, Marco, saw it differently. They understood that stepping away calmly, without confrontation, was not immaturity. It was clarity, agency, and respect for oneself. Marco reached out a few days later. "Lila," he said, voice careful, "I wanted to say that dinner, Andrew behavior, it wasn't right. I get it now, what you've been saying all these years about being sensitive and empathetic. It's not weakness, it's strength." It was the first time anyone had said that in a way that didn't feel patronizing. A small validation, yes, but it was enough to remind me that my instincts had been correct all along. By the weekend, I had started a small group chat with friends, not about drama, not about Andrew, but about real support, checking in, sharing resources, coordinating help for those who needed it. Claudia, Jenna, and a few others joined. Every message was intentional, thoughtful, human. It was remarkable, really, how much energy went into genuine care when there was no fear of ridicule. And yet, Andrew found out. I could see it in the texts. "Lila, you're using Claudia's situation to manipulate people against me. This is so unfair. Stop turning my friends against me." His messages were frantic, angry, trying to frame my calm, considerate actions as some kind of weapon. But I didn't respond. Not with words, not with anger, not with defense. There was no point. His frustration was proof, not accusation. The more I focused on helping, the more I realized that his ex-girlfriend, or anyone who had been a witness to his dismissive patterns, was irrelevant. What mattered was the people who chose kindness over mockery, the people who saw value in emotional intelligence. That was my circle now. That was where I belonged. There was a subtle shift in the group dynamic. Friends who had laughed at Andrew jokes at the birthday party began gravitating toward these real connections. Game nights, support sessions, quiet check-ins, all of it became a space where no one felt belittled for caring, for being sensitive, for being human. And then came the moment of clarity. Andrew's attempts to belittle me, to make me feel embarrassed, were never about me. They were about his inability to handle feelings that weren't his own. And that realization was liberating. I didn't need to convince him of my worth. I didn't need him to approve of my kindness. I just needed to live it, unapologetically, in the company of people who valued it. Even when his messages turned desperate, calls, texts, social media rants, I stayed focused, calm, present, grounded. My energy was for the people who needed me, for the moments that mattered, not for someone who had spent 3 years mocking the core of who I was. By the end of the week, I knew one thing with certainty. I had begun to rebuild a life where empathy was a strength, not a weakness, and Andrew's absence, once so terrifying, was now a relief. The storm had passed, and in its place, a quiet, unshakable strength had taken root. And for the first time, I understood that true growth didn't come from being less sensitive, less caring, less human. Growth came from standing firm, from choosing people who valued the real me, and from walking away from those who saw kindness as a flaw. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me said I needed to hear him out, once and for all. Andrew's voice was sharp, urgent, tinged with frustration and disbelief. "Lila, we need to talk," he said. I exhaled slowly, calmly. "We're talking now." He hesitated. I just don't understand. You left. You've been avoiding me. You're turning everyone against me." I let the words hang for a moment. Then, measured, I said, "Andrew, I'm not avoiding confrontation. I'm stepping away from toxicity. I'm not turning anyone against you. I'm choosing people who value kindness, empathy, and emotional intelligence. That's it." There was silence on the line, the kind that carries all the weight of unspoken realization. He was used to controlling the narrative, twisting small actions into judgments of character. But he hadn't anticipated that I could do exactly what he could not. Stand firm, calmly, without fear. You've made friends without me," he said finally. "That's manipulative. You're trying to make me look bad." I shook my head, though he couldn't see me. "No, Andrew, I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm just present for the people who need me. That's it. And yes, it exposes patterns you've repeated for years. Mockery, belittling, dismissing others' feelings. But that's your reflection, not mine." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're lecturing me now?" "I'm not lecturing," I said. "I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what growing up really looks like. It's not about shaming sensitivity. It's about recognizing that empathy isn't weakness. It's about walking away from someone who mocks what makes you human." There was a long pause. Then, quietly, almost vulnerably, he said, I thought you'd change. That I could, I don't know, fix it." "You can't fix me, Andrew," I said, "and I won't let anyone else try to fix my kindness. That's not broken." The line went quiet. Finally, I ended the call. Not angrily, not with triumph, just quietly, deliberately. I didn't need his approval, his validation, or even his understanding. I needed my life back. In the days that followed, the contrast became even clearer. Friends gravitated toward the spaces I had created: support for Claudia's father, care for Jenna's mother, group check-ins. Andrew remained outside, bewildered, frustrated, unable to navigate a world where empathy was valued. And that was exactly how it should be. A month later, the final act of closure came naturally. The relationship was over. Not in a dramatic fight or a courtroom scene, but in quiet, deliberate separation. The group of friends split, but not in the way Andrew might have hoped. It wasn't Team Andrew versus Team Lila. It was more organic. Those who valued emotional intelligence, authenticity, and kindness stayed close. Those who thrived on mockery and drama drifted elsewhere. And me? I thrived in the space I had claimed. I was no longer apologizing for sensitivity. I was no longer shrinking to make someone else comfortable. I was simply present, authentic, human. Weeks later, I received a text from Andrew. Brief, polite, hesitant. "I know you hate me, but I'm in therapy. Trying to understand myself. Why I've been the way I am. I'm sorry." I smiled faintly. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because he had finally begun a journey I had already completed on my own. "I don't hate you," I replied. "I hope you find peace." A week later, a new friend, Simone, reached out. She was someone who didn't apologize for tears at homecoming videos, for feeling deeply, for checking in on people she cared about. She said, "I love that you notice, that you care, that you don't hide it." And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been rediscovering all along. Sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a gift, one that connects you to people in ways that mockery never could. I look back on that birthday party, on Andrew's smirks and jokes, and finally understood what growing up really meant. Not diminishing yourself to fit someone else's comfort, not pretending kindness is a weakness, not shrinking to escape embarrassment. Growing up meant standing firm in your humanity, owning your empathy, choosing the people who value it, and walking away from the ones who see it as a flaw. The storm had passed, and in the quiet aftermath, I was finally free.